VLOOKUP is one of Excel's most popular and heavily used functions. In its most basic explanation, VLOOKUP allows you to search or look up data in your Excel sheet. You simply look up a value from one column, and VLOOKUP returns the value from another column in the same row. For example, take a look at this simple table. I have name as my starting column, then ID numbers, then email addresses. Now, normally Excel sheets can have thousands of rows, which makes it very hard to search or look up data by the naked eye. But for this video and for demonstration purposes only, I created just a few records. So, let's say I want to look up the ID number for someone with the name of Kevin. Using my own eye, it's natural that I will start to scroll from the top of the sheet and move down in a vertical direction until I find the word Kevin. And once I find it, I move with my eye to the right and find a matching ID. And bingo, this would be my answer. And so the VLOOKUP function does exactly the same thing, but much quicker. And as you might have guessed it already, the V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical, since we look up data in a vertical stack. Now to make VLOOKUP work, we just need to set it up like we do with any other Excel function. As we've learned on other videos, to start my Excel function, we have to first type an equal sign, followed by the function name, which in this case is VLOOKUP. And notice here the definition of VLOOKUP. Well, let me move this here so you can see it better. It says, look for a value in the leftmost column of a table, and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. By default, the table must be sorted in ascending order. I'll talk more about the parts that say leftmost column and ascending order. For now, let's continue with our VLOOKUP function by either pressing Tab on my keyboard or by typing and opening parentheses. This now displays what arguments are used with the VLOOKUP function. The first argument is the actual value to look up. So we want to find the ID of Kevin. So we type Kevin, and I have to put it in quotes since it's a string value, meaning it's a bunch of letters. Then we type a comma, and we see that the next argument is a table array. This simply means that the table where the value that you're searching for is found. Now this table array needs to include the lookup column as well as the result column. So in my example here, I need to highlight the name column as well as my ID column. Then I type comma, and now the next argument is the column index number. This simply means what column number is the return value found. And since I want an ID value returned, and it's my second column in my table array that I highlighted in my last argument, then I would type the value 2. Then I would type a comma again, and my last argument is actually an optional argument that is asking if the lookup value is an approximate or exact match. If you don't specify the argument value, it will default to true, which is the approximate match option. However, I don't want an approximate match, but instead I want an exact match for my lookup value, which is Kevin. And now that my function is all complete, I can hit enter on my keyboard, and voila, I get the matching ID for Kevin, which is 1017. Now if I go back to my formula and change Kevin to say Jerry, then hit enter, now the result is 1008, which is the correct matching ID for Jerry. Now a more practical use of this lookup would be to create a pull-down list of the name column and use that value in the VLOOKUP function. Here's how to do this quickly. I click on an empty cell where I want to create my pull-down list. Then up in the menu, I click on Data. Then in the Data Tools group, I click on this Data Validation icon, which opens up the Data Validation dialog box. Under the Allow pull-down menu, I will choose List. Then in my source, I click inside this field and simply select the cell range that will populate my pull-down list. In this case, it's these cells here. Then I just press on OK, and my pull-down list is created for me. So you can see it here, and I can scroll through all the names. And for now, let me pick Olivia. So now that I have this list created, let's create the VLOOKUP function once again. This time, use this list so I can dynamically change the name and see the result change on the fly. Let me click on the cell where I want the results to be displayed. Then I type an equal sign followed by VLOOKUP, then hit Tab on my keyboard so I can enter into the function and start adding the arguments. The first argument is the lookup value, and instead of typing out the name manually like we did with the last example, I'll click on the pull-down menu, and whatever name is currently displayed, that will be the lookup value that is used to find the ID. And for now, our value is Olivia, but this value is not hard-coded in the VLOOKUP function, but only the cell number, which contains the pull-down list. Then I type a comma to move to my next argument, which is my table array, and like before, I will highlight the columns that have the lookup value and the return value, like this. Then I type a comma, and for the column index number, I will enter a 2, since the ID column is column number 2 in my selected table array. Then I type a comma to move to my last argument, and I choose false as I'm specifying an exact match. Then I can finally hit enter on my keyboard since I'm done with the VLOOKUP. So the Olivia name lookup correctly returned an ID of 1011. Now here's the cool part. Since I have a pull-down list, I can choose another name from the list, say Scott, and the value will automatically change since the VLOOKUP function is dynamically built to use whatever name value is picked from the pull-down menu. So as you can see here, I'm changing names and the ID value changes as well. Pretty cool, right? Now, as much as the VLOOKUP function is effective and powerful, it still has some limitations. For example, let's go back to our previous VLOOKUP formula. I chose the number 2 for my column index number because I wanted to return the ID value. Well, what happens if I want to return the email value instead? Well, logically, I would think to just change my number 2 value to a number 3 because email is my third column, right? So let's try that. I get a reference error. I wonder why. Well, if we examine the VLOOKUP function correctly, we notice that my table array, which should hold my lookup column and result column, only includes these two columns. But I want to return a result value from a column that is not in my table array. This is not allowed because it's outside my table array. But the fix is easy. So the fix here is to modify my table array value to include all 3 columns, like that. Then I hit enter, and now the error is gone, and we have a value in the results field. So the lesson learned here is, when using VLOOKUP, please select all columns for the table array, as you never know which columns you might want to look up down the road. Another major limitation of VLOOKUP is that it only does a lookup to the right. What does that mean? Well, in my table example here, my lookup column was the name column, and so any result column must be to the right of this name column. So I can look up name and find an ID value, or an email value, since both of these results column are on the right side of the name column. However, I cannot use the ID column as my lookup value and be able to return a result value from the name column. Why? Because it's on the left. So again, VLOOKUP can only look to the right of the lookup column. Let me show you this quickly. I'll click on the cell where I want to display my result, then I type an equal sign. Then I type VLOOKUP and press Tab on my keyboard. For my lookup value, I'll enter any value from the ID column. So let's use the first ID of 1001. Then I type a comma. Then I select the entire table for my table array. Then I type a comma. Then I type the number 1, since I want to return a name value, which is column number 1 in my selected table array. Then I type a comma. Then I type false and hit enter. So as expected, I got an error. Why? Because the all-powerful VLOOKUP cannot look up to the left, as I just showed you in this example. So now if I change the column index number from 1 to the number 3, which column number 3 is the column to the right side of the ID column, then this should work and return the email address, right? Well, let's find out. It still does not work. Well, the reason it still fails is found right in the definition of the VLOOKUP function itself. Take a look here. See how it says here, look for a value in the leftmost column of a table. So this means if I want to use the ID column as my lookup value, then this column must be the first column in my table array, like this. I'll start a new VLOOKUP function. I'll type 1001. Then in my table array, I'll start selecting the ID as my first column and continue on to the email column. This means that the name column is no longer part of my lookup function and won't be used. This also means I can only get results from the email column because it's the only column left to the right side of the ID column. And so I type number 2 for the column index number, since it's the second column in my table array. Then I choose false, and then I hit enter. And now it works. So as you can see, this is one limitation in using VLOOKUP. Now, one way around this limitation in VLOOKUP is to use a helper column. For example, since I want to look up an ID value and return a name value, but since VLOOKUP only looks to the right, I can simply copy the name column and paste it as a helper column at the end, like this. Now, the name column is to the right of my ID, so it will work if I just modify some values in my formula. I need to click on my table array data and now move the highlighted area like this to only include the helper column, but exclude the original name column. So now the ID column is my first column in my table array. Then I need to modify the column index number to be number 3, since now I want to return the name value, which is column number 3 in my new table array. Then I hit enter and I get the name value. If I wanted to return the email value, then I would just go back to my formula and change this number 3 value to a number 2 because email is the second column in the table array in this formula. And when I hit enter, boom, I get the email address. So let's just write out this function one more time quickly from scratch, since sometimes when I modify an existing formula, it confuses people. Alright, I'll click on my cell where I want to display my result, then an equal sign, then VLOOKUP, then tab, then any ID, so let's do 10,009, then comma. Then for my table array, I'll highlight my columns like this, starting with my lookup column, which is my ID column, then dragging to here. Then I type a comma. Then for my column number, it would be number 3, which is the name column, since that's what I want to return. Then I type another comma, and I'll choose false, so I want an exact match. Then I hit enter, and boom, it works. Now many of you might not like this idea of moving columns or copying and pasting columns. I personally don't like it, and I don't do it, but I just wanted to show you as an option. But the good news is, there is another workaround that's a bit cleaner. So let me first get rid of this helper column. Okay, the other cleaner way is the choose function. We can use the choose function inside our VLOOKUP function. Now, what the choose function does is that it chooses a value from a set of values based on an index number. What all that means really is that I can choose what data I need from my existing table and how this data can be displayed or rearranged. All this can be done by using the choose function. So for example, this is my current data, right? Well, I can choose to display this data by choosing just the first column or by choosing all columns. but have them rearranged in another way. For example, right now, the problem is that I want to keep my columns as is without moving them or creating a helper column. And I want to use the ID column as my lookup column and get a result from the name column, which is left of the ID column. And as we know, this is not possible with VLOOKUP. Why? Because VLOOKUP only looks to the right. So let me show you first how the choose function works all by itself. Then I will show you how it works within the VLOOKUP to help us solve this problem. And please be patient with me, as this might be complicated at first, but please trust me. I'll walk you through it step by step, slowly, and you can always replay any part of this video to see it as many times as you like. But bottom line, I am 100% confident you can do it. So let's click in any cell where we want to display our result, then type the equal sign, then the word choose, then I'll hit tab on my keyboard, and now it's asking us for an index number. This is simply the number of columns you want to work with. And since I have 3 columns in my sample table, I will list them like this, in an array format, using curly brackets, separated by commas. If you want to work with only 2 columns, then you just type 1, 2. If you want to work with 4 columns, then you just type 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so on and so on. Again, please be patient with me and it will make sense in just a moment. So now that I specified that I will be working with 3 columns, I now need to choose which 3 columns I'm talking about. So for my first column, which I want to make it the ID column, I'll select these values. Then I type comma. And for my second column, I want to display the name column. So I select these values. Then I type comma. And for my third column, I'll select the email cells. Now when I hit enter, it displays for me the 3 columns in the order that I specified. And that's the key, the order of the columns. My first column is the ID, then name, then email. So as you can see now, I rearranged the columns in a way that my first column is the ID, so I can now use it as my lookup column and return a value from the name column. Why? Because I rearranged the columns so that the name is to the right of the ID column. Okay, now how does this help us? Well, I can now take this exact choose formula and insert it right into a VLOOKUP function right where it's asking us for a table array. First, let's copy the choose formula. Then let's click in any cell. I'll type equal sign, then VLOOKUP. Then I'll type any ID value, let's say 1005, then a comma. This brings me to the table array argument. And all I have to do here is just paste my choose formula that I copied a moment ago. Then I type a comma. Now it's asking me for what column to return. Now I want to return a value from the name column. So I will enter number 2 because my table array now is not this table array, but it's this table array, which was made from the choose function. So I will enter 2 because I want to return a value from the name column, which is my second column here. Then I type a comma and I choose false and hit enter. And look here, wow, I was able to fool VLOOKUP to look to the left. Well, kind of. But how cool is that? So basically, I was able to work around one of its limitations. In another video, I will show you another way to do lookups in Excel, but this time it will use the combination of the index function and the match function. And I also have another video about the most powerful lookup functions of all, which is the X lookup function. So I kindly ask you to please subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon so you will be notified when these new videos are uploaded and are ready for you. And as always, thank you for watching, thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.